Hey folks, Dan from the Hobby Jerks here to talk to you about how to stream miniature wargaming on YouTube or Twitch or whatever platform you prefer. We started doing this with the Hobby Jerks about 4 months ago now, 4 or 5 months ago. And I knew nothing about any of this stuff going into it. And so the hardest thing for me when we started out was the lack of tutorials that were out there to really show a beginner how to get started with streaming. Now, there's lots of videos out there that help with streaming video games, but there's next to nothing out there to help you stream a live activity like miniature wargaming, where you potentially are going to have multiple cameras and you need audio sources and lighting and all sorts of other tech that is frankly a complete mystery if you don't know where to start. And that's what this video is intended to do. We're going to give you step-by-step instructions on how to create a basic streaming setup to stream things like games like Warhammer, the Old World, 40K, whatever else you're going to be playing in your basement on your table. So in order to do this, basically you need to have 6 core components to get this up and running. The first of which is going to be a decent computer. You need a computer that has a strong enough processor and preferably a dedicated graphics card that can actually do the video encoding that you need to do. Second, you need to have cameras. You obviously need at least one camera to capture video, preferably multiple cameras to get, multiple angles, because no one wants to watch a 3 or 4 hour video that's one static shot the whole time. You also need cables. You're going to need more cables than you think. You need, most of this is hooked up through USB cables, and there are some quirks to there and some things that I wish I had known before I spent dozens and dozens of hours buying and shopping on Amazon and troubleshooting in my basement. You are also going to need some lighting. Whatever lighting you have, it is probably not going to be enough. Just because it looks good to your eye doesn't mean it's going to look good on camera. Next, you also need microphones. Audio is perhaps more important than video when it comes to creating, posting videos on things like YouTube. If you have bad audio, people are going to tune out immediately. You need to have clear audio, and you can get that through some very simple tech like lapel mics, which are not expensive. Finally, you need some software that captures all these inputs and creates a video output, whether that's a recording or directly streaming to something like YouTube or Twitch. For that, I strongly recommend using OBS Studio. It is a free open source platform that pretty much every single person uses. It has a million plugins. There's a wealth of information online. It is the gold standard of streaming software, and I strongly recommend that you use it. Finally, there's the other stuff. These are things like, we have a soundboard on our channel where we constantly play stupid little media clips in response to things that happen during the game. And we do this, by hooking up some software that interacts between the iPad that we have next to the table and the OBS platform, where we have kind of videos preloaded and ready to go, but there needs to be a trigger. So we use the iPad to act as a soundboard to play the videos. There's lots of other cool stuff that you can do like that, like overlays that can keep a scoreboard on the screen, or, you're pretty much only limited by your imagination. Okay, so let's talk about your computer. In order to stream and either record your video or post it online, you're going to need a relatively fast computer to do all the video encoding. That is taking that video signal and basically creating a digital output, which is compressed enough where it can actually stream directly online, or it can just be created into a digital file. Now, when we first started streaming, we tried doing this with a very old MacBook Air. That didn't cut it. The video encoder kept getting overloaded and then crashing, and so we could neither record files nor could we post directly to YouTube with that piece of tech. So instead, what I decided to do was to hook this directly up to my gaming PC. Now, unfortunately, my gaming PC is not in my basement where we actually play the game. So I had to basically rewire some of my house to have, to run cables from my gaming PC downstairs to a separate terminal that I set up, which lets us control the computer from downstairs. That terminal is also where we receive all the different audio and video input signals. And those signals come to us from the cameras and from the microphones, and those are transmitted over USB cables. So I think everybody probably knows what those are. If you don't, you can Google them. They're kind of the basic connectivity cables that we use for most modern devices, including your phone. You know, whatever phone charger you have is probably doing that over a USB 3.0 or USB-C cable. Now, most computers will not have enough USB inputs to take care of all of the devices that you need. Let's say, like we do, we have 4 cameras downstairs. We have a microphone. We have a separate, separate keyboard and mouse that are hooked up as a terminal to control the computer upstairs. I've already exceeded the 4 USB inputs that I have on my computer. So for this reason, you're probably going to need to buy at least one USB hub. So a USB hub takes multiple USB inputs and converts it to a single output, which you can then have it go into a single port on your computer. So you could put, up to 8 or 10 devices all through the same channel into one port input on your computer. Now, you'll see a lot of tutorials online where they recommend that you don't use USB hubs because they can get overloaded. You need to think of the port on your computer that receives the USB signal as part of basically it's called a bus channel, and I'm probably getting some of this terminology wrong. Think of it just as you've got one or more kind of USB channels on your motherboard in your computer. And, think of it like a highway. If there's too many cars on the highway, the data does not flow smoothly through. It does not move quickly through the route. If you have too many of these, then, your USB channel will get overloaded. So you can't put all 4 cameras on one USB hub. Eventually the signal will not get through and you won't get any input on any of those cameras. So what we do downstairs is we have 2 USB hubs, and they both go to a separate bus channel on my PC because I have 2 of them. So that way I don't overload either one of them. I put 2 cameras on each, I split up the other devices and try and balance it as best I can, and that seems to work. If you are hooking up multiple devices through a single bus and your computer is not detecting the video input, for example, try disconnecting one of the cameras and then it might work. If that's the case, then what's happening is you're overloading your channel and you need to split it off to a second channel or to a third or however many channels you have on your motherboard. That was one of the trickiest things for us and drove me crazy trying to figure it out until I realized that was what was the problem. Now, once you have your USB hub set up, you're going to have to do a lot of wiring. You're going to need a lot of cables, right? Every device is going to need its own cable. Most devices, like your cameras, if you're using like a webcam or something like that, they have a very short cable that comes out of it, typically a USB 3.0 cable. You're then going to need a cable extender, which will go from that to the hub, and then from the hub to your PC. And then that, the USB cord that comes out of the hub is also usually very short, so you probably need another extender from the USB hub to your PC. So if you say you have 4 webcams set up, you're going to need 4 extenders for the webcams, and then you've got 2 hubs, so you're going to need 2 more extenders. You're already up to 6 different cables that you're going to need just to hook up the cameras. So the cable management gets out of control pretty fast. You really need to kind of plan out and diagram your entire setup to figure out exactly what cables you're going to need. Because of course you're going to have to buy all this stuff and you don't want to have to go, realize you're 1 or 2 cables short and then wait and get it delivered and then mess around with stuff and return stuff. It's just a big mess. It's a lot easier if you plan it out from the very beginning. Now, one other thing that's really important to know about USB cables is there are different types of USB cables. There are the older versions called USB 2.0, which are a lot slower than the more modern current versions called USB 3.0. I think they also go to 3.1 and 3.2, which are progressively faster speeds. But basically, if you're going to be using transmitting video from a camera to your computer, you're going to need to use at least USB 3.0 cables. So when you do buy your cables, make sure they are 3.0 or above. Do not buy USB 2.0 cables. There are also USB-C cables, which use the USB 3.0 technology. So they are essentially the same speed, but they have a different different cable shape on the end. So you may also need to get adapters if you have these cables, or if you have devices that only take a USB-C input or only give a USB-C output or something like that. So be mindful of what types of ports you have on your devices and get appropriate cables or adapters to fit. Now, the last thing about USB, which is critically important, is that USB 3.0 and above has a maximum length over which you can transmit data. So if you try to transmit data over too long of a distance, like if you use a bunch of extenders and connectors and try and go past about, online it usually tells you about 30 feet, you can definitely get away with more than that, but you probably can't get away with much more than like 45 feet. Once you get past that level, you're going to get too much signal degradation, and you're not going to get the signal to transmit over that distance. This is another thing that drove me crazy until I figured out what was going on, because I was originally using like a 60-foot connection to get it from my office down to the basement, and that did not work. But once I shortened that and eliminated some of the connectors and kind of streamlined, made a more direct route from my computer down to the stream table, everything worked fine. So make sure that you are minimizing the length of your run if you're connecting to a distant source. Now, obviously the best thing to do is to move your computer right next to wherever you're streaming. That way you don't have to worry about any of this stuff. But if you are streaming to a different part of your house or to a distant device, you need to be mindful of the amount of distance between your devices and the computer that's receiving all that input. All right, let's talk about cameras. In order to stream video, you obviously need at least one camera. Preferably multiple cameras if you're streaming from a few different angles to make it a little bit more interesting, have a better composition to your overall video. What we do on our stream is we have 4 separate cameras. The main camera that we use for kind of our side shot where you can see both players and the entire table, I actually use my personal cell phone for that, which is a Google Pixel 7a. Smartphone cameras are incredibly sophisticated. They're probably better than any other camera that you have in your house, unless you spend, a serious amount of money on actual camera equipment. So I strongly recommend using your smartphone camera as kind of your default and your main camera, unless you want to actually invest in something more, a standalone professional camera. So we use that for our side shot. We also use an old iPhone 6, my old work phone from, 8-9 years ago. We use that for our kind of mobile camera that does close-ups on models. Again, even though it's an older smartphone, the camera is actually extraordinary. It gives really good, crisp video shots whenever it's actually functioning. I do have some issues with that, which I think is related to kind of those that USB kind of traffic issue to the bus on my computer. But that's something I have to figure out. But it's unrelated to the camera itself. The camera itself is beautiful, and I strongly recommend, again, using smartphone cameras unless you want to invest in a better camera. For our top-down view, we use a Logitech C920X. This is kind of like the default streamer camera. A lot of the Twitch streamers use this. This is kind of like what everybody recommends to get as a very cost-efficient, very solid 1080p HD webcam. This will output good video at high definition at 1080p. It costs about $70 on Amazon, so it's relatively affordable. It often goes on sale for like $50, so it's something you can definitely get pretty easily, pretty cheaply, and it gives a pretty good picture. It's not perfect, especially for the more far away shots. If I had another smartphone, I'd probably use that for our top-down view. But it does a pretty good job, and I recommend it. It does a very good job for close-up. So if you need to use it for kind of that side view shot that we do, it'd probably do a pretty good shot, job of doing that as well. And then finally, we have a 4th camera set up for the dice cam. Now this is something where we don't need a very good camera, because frankly, I'm using a lower resolution image. It's a tiny little square in the corner of the screen. I'm not doing a full 1080p video for the dice. So here I use a very cheap $30 webcam. It's in eMeet 960 or something like that. It costs less than $30 on Amazon. It does the job well. It's not laggy. It doesn't need a whole lot of light to give a decent picture. And frankly, the image quality doesn't matter that much. We're just showing some dice. So now for cameras, what you need to be mindful of a few different things. I would definitely do a lot of research if you're planning on buying cameras. They can be extremely expensive. You can easily spend $1,000 or more on cameras. You probably don't want to do that if you're just getting started. You probably want to do this as cheaply as possible. So I strongly recommend that Logitech camera. You could even buy a couple of them. You could do them for each angle. They're very easy to hook up. They integrate extremely easy with OBS. Just remember to separate them to different channels because you don't want to overload your computer's bus with too much data, and then you won't get signal from either one of them. One other thing to consider about cameras, and specifically webcams, is they tend to have a slight fisheye effect to them, especially when you're not close up. So you'll notice this if you, like we did, we mounted a webcam on the ceiling so that it can capture the entire table. And the first thing that we noticed is that the picture had a fisheye effect to it. The edges were curved, and more curved as you got closer to the edge of the picture. Now, you can actually fix this in OBS. It's one of the great things about OBS is there's basically an unlimited supply of plugins for every single situation that you can imagine. And one of them is to specifically correct this fisheye lens effect. So you can download a plugin, you can apply it then as a filter in OBS, and you can basically shape all the edges of your camera to straighten out the fisheye effect and get a perfectly rectangular image like you'd want to see for your table. Because of course, the lens on a camera is circular, it's not rectangular. So if you want to, the image to fit in a perfect 1080p, 16:9 ratio frame, most lenses are not going to do that very well, but you can correct that using filters in OBS. Okay, on to lighting. Lighting is very important for your video. You will always need more lighting than you think you do. Just because it looks good to your eye doesn't mean it's going to look good on camera. When you have too little light, your video stream is going to be grainy, and it's also going to require that whatever camera is capturing that image is going to have to do a lot of post-processing to brighten up the image. And doing that takes processing time and also slows down the conversion of the video input to a digital output. And that creates lag, because whatever time it takes to do the post-processing will bring it out of sync potentially with your audio. And if you're doing that live, that can be a big problem. There are ways to overcome that. Specifically in OBS, you can introduce a delay automatically to account for the lag that your camera might be experiencing, but it's a lot better just to eliminate that as a problem altogether. And you can do that by adding light to your scene. So basically adding additional light sources. If you want to do this really on the cheap, you can just bring in a bunch of lamps and try and brighten up the scene. But it's better to do that with things like LED panels or ring lights or some kind of combination of the two. We use both in our setup. I think I have 2 LED panels downstairs, one on the ceiling, one off to the side of the camera, and then an additional ring light, which also brightens up the scene from the angles that the video is being taken, so that the facings of the models that are facing the camera are brightly and properly lit so that it creates a good crisp image, because we don't want it to be grainy. That introduces noise to the video. It doesn't look good on camera, so you really want to try and avoid that, and you can do that pretty cheaply. Ring lights are not expensive. They cost like $20, $30 online on Amazon. And then you can buy LED panels with tripods included. I think I bought 2 of them for $50 on Amazon. Again, not expensive. You can get this whole setup running for, a few $100s, as a basic fundamental investment, and it is worth every penny. Okay, on to audio. So audio, just like video, is critically important for your stream. There's a lot of advice out there from popular YouTubers and such that tell you that audio is probably even more important than video, because if someone, tunes into your video and starts watching it and the audio is bad, they're going to immediately tune out and navigate away. You need to have good, clear audio. You can do that through a number of ways. The microphone on your smartphone, if you're using that as a camera, is usually pretty good, but it is not going to be good if it is not close up. I'm using the audio on my smartphone right now, but I'm less than a foot away from it. If you're, 10 feet away because you're, filming a gaming table and you need to have multiple people in frame, you're not going to get good audio, and you're not going to be able to hear both people clearly from it. The way you can overcome this is by simply buying some cheap lapel mics, which you can find on Amazon for, $30 to $50. They're not that expensive. The battery life will last a very long time. I've got mine up on screen right now, as you can use as an example. They cost about $30. These are the ones that we use on stream every single week. The audio quality is not incredible, but it's fine for what we're doing. You can adjust the volumes. The microphones and the transmitter, they have a battery that will last approximately 5 hours, which is plenty enough for any single game. So you can basically charge it up, record your entire game, not have to worry about the audio dropping out. Now, you can get more expensive, like any other, like any audio and video equipment. The sky is the limit in terms of price. You can easily spend hundreds of dollars on microphones. You can get much better quality audio out of them as well. But if you're just getting started, you probably just want some cheap lapel mics. Don't go nuts. Start with the basics, get everything running properly, and then slowly upgrade over time. Now, one other thing to consider if you're using lapel mics is they typically have 2 microphones, and then you're going to have a receiver. So the receiver device is receiving the signal from the microphones, and that receiver then plugs into your USB port or your USB cable, which will then go directly into your computer, and that'll be an audio channel that will input as a microphone into your computer. So typically both of the lapel mics will go into a single audio channel, so you won't be able to change the sound levels of them separately. If you want to do that, which is something that we plan as an upgrade for our stream in the near future, because Mike talks a lot louder than I do, and so his microphone is always louder and mine is always softer. But if we have 2 separate sets of lapel mics and 2 separate receivers, we can then manipulate those audio levels separately. So it's something to consider. But if you're just starting out, get one set, you have the receiver, it gets into your computer, it sets up as a microphone, and then in OBS, you can then select, create an audio stream and then capture, select that microphone, and you'll see the audio levels pop up in the system, and you can tweak the volume up and down as needed to get an appropriate level of volume. Okay, let's talk more about OBS. I've mentioned it many times already, but OBS Studio is the official name. This is the free open source streaming software platform that pretty much every YouTuber and every Twitch streamer is using, and I strongly recommend you use it. There are alternatives out there, but frankly, I would say 95, if not more % of streamers are using this for their software. This is kind of your control center for all of the different inputs, video, audio, and whatever else you've got going on, that integrate them all into a single video, which then outputs to a file or directly to a streaming site. You can integrate it directly with YouTube and with Twitch, so that it, whatever goes through OBS will go directly to those live, and you don't have to do anything else. Or you can save it to like an MP4 file or MPV, whatever video format you want to use, and then you can upload it later directly. So OBS is a tremendously flexible platform. It's open source, so you've got a million different people creating their own plugins for it. Pretty much every single problem that you can encounter with OBS, you can Google and find an answer for, and there's probably a plugin for whatever you're trying to do. Like I mentioned already, you can correct that fisheye lens effect. You can create filters for your audio, for your video. You can denoise video, you can denoise audio. You can do everything you can imagine. You can probably find a filter for in OBS. And many of them are already built into the platform without having to install any plugins at all. Some of the other cool things that you can do, you can set up macros, which I use all the time. We have it set up so that, different images can come on, and actually you can animate images across the screen to move in a pattern or, in a way that you want to have happen with the single press of a button. You just kind of create the macro and it will replay out once you trigger it. And so there's a lot of cool stuff that you can do. We use that to, let you know when there's a turn change during the game, turn 1, turn 2, turn 3, and so on. We have, of course, a ton of that soundboard stuff hooked up, which we have hooked up to an iPad, which uses it to trigger a plugin in OBS, which then plays a media file, which is already loaded into OBS.
I'd take a flamethrower to this place!
Yes. We use it for the intro, for the outro. All that stuff is, those are not recorded videos for the most part. I think there's maybe 1 or 2 integrated into it, but those are actually animations that are done in OBS itself. Not videos that have been pre-recorded, so that when I want to change the graphics that are in, like the intro, for example, that shows you the 2 armies that are playing, all you have to do is save a new image file, and that will automatically load into the macro in OBS, and when we trigger the intro, it'll play itself. So it's a super flexible platform. you can do so much in it. I'm not going to even try and explain how it works because frankly, it is a little bit complicated. It's more daunting than complicated because it has so many features. You won't use most of them. Primarily, you're going to be setting up streams, or setting up scenes rather. So that's kind of the core functionality of how the system works. You create a scene. Each scene has its own audio and video media sources associated with it, and you can switch between scenes. So usually you'll have, each scene will have kind of a main camera associated with it, or you can have multiple cameras like we do, where we have like a little image, picture in a picture kind of thing in the top corner, dice cam in the bottom left corner, and then the main background is a single shot of something else. That main camera will be, you know, one of the main media source, or the main video source for that scene. And then a different scene will have a different video source. So, you know, on scene one, we have the side view camera, which I use, you know, my smartphone captures that image. Then for scene two, we have the overhead camera, and that is the, you know, the main video input for that scene. And then for scene three, we use the arm cam, the other smartphone, my iPhone, which is on a swivel cam. And then I've created macros to zoom in and zoom out when you switch between those cameras. So kind of like when you go from the like the close-up arm cam and you switch to the overhead top cam, it looks like it's zooming out, and that's done using macros and some of the different features that you can use in the OBS filters, which are really cool. So I'm not going to explain how OBS works because beyond that general overview, it can be very complicated, and also more importantly because there are a million very detailed tutorials out there. You don't have to spend hours learning OBS. You can probably watch like a 15 or 20-minute tutorial and really know all you need to know about how to make a basic streaming setup. So I strongly urge you to find some of those. I'll toss a couple of links in the description for this chat, for this video, so you can quickly find what you need. Now, if you're using your smartphone as one of your cameras, you are going to need some software to help it integrate into, you know, for your computer to see it as a webcam and actually be able to integrate its video input into something like OBS. So for this, I use an app called Droidcam, which is pretty popular for this specific purpose. It's designed for this purpose. And what it does is it converts that video signal from your phone, which is connected by USB cable, to your computer. And it basically tells your computer to treat that as a webcam input. And then that webcam input can then integrate into OBS through a plugin, and then show it up on the screen just like any other camera that you have hooked up. Droidcam, I believe, is free on Android, but it costs something like $5 a year on iOS. It's worth the investment. It works pretty seamlessly, and it's a good use of $5. Now, on to some of the other cool features and things that you can do to make your stream stand out a little bit. As I mentioned, one of the things that we do on our stream is we have kind of a soundboard, a lot of like wacky, stupid audio clips that I use as kind of little reaction videos to things that happen during the game. Like this, for example, or like this. These are things that we can trigger with the push of a button using a piece of software called Stream Deck by Elgato. So Stream Decks are actually hardware devices that you can buy in the store. They cost around $200 or so, and it's kind of like a small, I don't know, it's like a little tablet, but it's not a tablet. It has basically buttons on it, and you can program the buttons to run certain macros or trigger certain things that are connected to your stream by using this Elgato Stream Deck software. Now, you can also use the software, though, and hook it up to a smartphone or hook it up to a mobile device like a tablet and use that just like you would use that Stream Deck device without having to actually purchase the hardware. So it'll project you open up the Stream Deck app on your iPad, for example. That's what we use. And it'll show a series of about 15 buttons on the screen, and you can program each button individually to play a certain macro that is hooked up to your OBS software. And you install a plugin, and the plugin connects the Stream Deck software to your OBS client, and then it can basically do whatever you want it to do. You can have it change scenes for you. You can have it play specific video files or audio files.
Hoo-ah!
You can also have it manipulate a scoreboard. In fact, that's what we did when we were hosting, when we were playing 40K games, is we had an entire programmed scoreboard through a website called Scoreboard Assistant, which takes a long time to set up. You have to know HTML and you have to know CSS and you have to be able to actually program all of those components of it. But once you do, it's very powerful, and you can hook that up to Stream Deck, and then you can actually change the score using the Stream Deck, which then feeds info back to the Scoreboard Assistant, which then feeds info back into OBS and projects it onto an overlay on your screen and can change the score in real time on the screen without having to do anything other than press a few buttons on a smartphone or on a mobile device. So again, OBS is just infinite flexibility. Your imagination is really the limit here. Anything you can think of, you can do, but it does take a little bit of time and know-how to figure out how to make all the components work together. However, rest assured, because there are so many thousands or millions of people using this, someone else has probably already thought of that, and there probably is a plugin or an app or some kind of piece of software that will connect all the different parts for you. It's just a matter of figuring out what that is, where it is, and then how to make it all work together. So this is our stream table and the view that you've probably seen on our channel before. What you haven't seen are some of the things that happen off camera and which are positioned out of view, which help kind of create this picture and make it look pretty good. So what we have here on the right is an LED panel light on a tripod. We have another ring light right here facing the table. And then finally, we have a third light up on the ceiling, which projects straight down. See, this is in my basement. We've got 4 other lights in the ceiling, but nothing was really mounted in the center right above where the table is. So I needed to add an additional light there to get some light to help that top-down view. And then the other lights help from this camera view to keep everything well lit and get a nice crisp image. Now, in terms of our cameras, we have my phone, which I'm holding right now, which we use for our side camera. But we also have a camera here that is mounted on the ceiling. That's a Logitech webcam. And then finally, a third cam here on an adjustable arm, which kind of swivels back and forth and can go up and down, and which is clipped to the table, which we use to get close-ups when we do kind of things in the combat phase and when we want to show the models a little bit, more in frame. And then finally, we have a fourth camera here, which is our dice cam, which is just a very cheap $30 webcam, which we use to get a lower resolution image of the dice, which then goes in the corner of the screen. Now, in addition to the lighting and the cameras, we also have here a computer terminal, which is set up. So earlier in the video, I mentioned that everything for the stream actually gets fed up to my gaming PC, which is upstairs in my office on a different floor of the house. However, to manipulate the stream, to actually run it, to respond to messages and to fix problems, we need to be able to access that stream down here from the streaming tables. That's the reason why I set up this terminal. So this terminal is not a computer by itself. It's just a duplicated video image of one of the screens I have upstairs, duplicated audio to the speaker here, a keyboard and a mouse, which can, which are hooked up again through USB to the computer upstairs, which can manipulate and actually run the stream. To the left of the terminal, I have an old laptop which I use, and we use really just this for the screen. We show the chat, we blow it up to the maximum font size so that we can actually see it just by turning our head from the stream table without actually having to leave or come over to this other monitor and see what's going on. All right, so we've covered a lot of stuff. We've talked about your need that you're going to need a computer, you're going to need cables, you're going to need cameras, you're going to need lighting, you're going to need microphones, you're going to need streaming software. So, what is the bottom line here? Well, if you figure you're going to spend you probably need like 2 cameras. So that's about $70 a pop if you go with the Logitech cameras. You're going to need a bunch of cables. You're probably going to need 1 or 2 USB hubs. You're going to need some lighting, and you're going to need some microphones. All in all, you're probably looking at an initial investment of about $300, $350 US to get this up and running and to have a decent quality stream. Now, you can do it a little bit cheaper, especially if you go with less cameras. Having your computer by your streaming table will save you a lot of time and also money in terms of cables and everything else. And if you have adequate lighting, you can save on that. So there are ways to save here and do this a lot cheaper. A single camera setup without a dedicated microphone, you can have that plugged directly into your computer. That would definitely be the cheapest way to do it. But if you want to have a little bit more flexibility, a few more options, have the stream be a little bit more sophisticated, you're talking about a minimal, investment of a few $100, which is really not that bad to get this all up and running. So hopefully this will save you a little bit of time. especially some of the potential troubleshooting, which you will encounter. This is not going to go as smoothly as you think. You're going to learn a lot by doing it. And if you have questions, though, hit me up with a comment here, send me an email. Happy to try and work with you and to figure things out and give you the limited knowledge that I have accumulated over the past 4 months doing this streaming. So hopefully you found this video helpful. If you did, please consider subscribing to the channel, and hopefully we will see you soon.